This is a summary of the May 2018 topic on the individual and humanity, Patrick Lecture 120. I fell behind on creating these, so I'm making two in a row, one from the April meeting and one from this meeting. The basic theme of the individual and humanity is the micro represents the macro, the small, unique individual process represents cultural, national, global process. It's an invitation to non-judgmentally see a concept that's operating in your life in the larger realm of human experience, and conversely, to see a concept that is operating in the larger cultural, national, geopolitical reality in your own life. It's another version of I see you in me, and I see me in you. That this is a way of gaining a deeper understanding of why people do things. If I understand why I do things, it is easier for me to generously see where you do something similar for a similar reason, even if it is not the same. So the four subtopics were parallels in the growth process of individuals and humanity, the transition from self-centeredness to selfhood, the adolescent stage of development, and the ongoing process of individualization. So in the first week, when we looked at parallels in the growth process of individuals and humanity, most people accept that we are more educated in terms of the entire population base being educated today than we have been in the past. For all the negative aspects of smartphones and internet connections, nothing is perfect. It's going to encourage bad habits, but it also has some good options. We are becoming an interconnected global population. It's changing things, and it's changing things very rapidly. And so there's some deconstructive aspects of growth, or you have to take something apart to make room for the new. The game here is to see that in our lives individually, and then see it in the larger context. Now, I use the word game because the guide said, and it obviously resonated with me, some things resonate very strongly with you about the lectures and other things you barely remember. But when the guide said you have to have a sense of humor to do this work, that really hit home for me. Because there's a tendency to be weepy or sorrow-based or overly serious about this work that I do not believe helps the work. I believe that we can become distracted by the sense that it's hard work and painful and a lot of crying. And that's all true, and sometimes we do learn by having fun, by being in community with others. And it's important to keep that alive as well. So I feel that I succeed in working with people when I can get them to laugh about their own foolishness. It tells me that they've risen over it, that they are, oh yeah, okay, what a silly thing to do. It is a way of integrating it, of accepting, I was foolish, I see it, and we will move on in a different form. So I use humor a lot. I don't use it so much in this forum because I'm only talking to a camera, but, and the humor is hopefully based specifically on the individual so that it does not in any way look like mocking or being overly lighthearted about something that they are very concerned about. So one of the things I do is I suggest short films, articles. These are in my newsletters and on my websites I try to find different ways to understand something so that it's not always stern and drawn about ourselves and our problems and our lower selves. That we can begin to see that it's a human issue. We share this with the people around us. And if we help ourselves, then there's work to be done where we can help others. So in order to do this, I found, for instance, for this particular month's presentation, I brought up again the Charles and Ray Eames 1956 film, The Powers of 10, which is available for free on their website, and I have links on my websites. And it is a very short 10-minute film that compares the astrophysics going out into space at a certain rate, power of 10, going out into the space until we've reached the edge of our understanding. And there's nothing but space. Galaxies aren't even in our field of vision. We're so far away from everything. And then, using the technology of the 50s, coming back to the individual and going into the cells of their body, and going into the mitochondria and the DNA and the cellular material down to the atomic level. And what they found, they couldn't go to the powers of 10 because they didn't have strong enough electron microscopes in the 50s. So they couldn't go as far in as they could go out. But they could go far enough in where they noticed it looked the same. There's more nothing than anything when you go down to a certain atomic level. So this film, in a visual and a mathematical and social scientific sense, is a way of understanding this lecture, and I found them to be a good match. The two other things that I brought into this month are a game that I invented about karma, where you make a presumption that everything is perfect. Immediately, everybody starts to argue. That's okay. If you play the game, you need to play as if, as you recount your journey, play as if everything was perfect. Now, I feel that this is a pathwork game because the guide says there are no coincidences, there are no mistakes, and no errors. This is very difficult for the human mind to understand. I'll take a whack at it here, but I do this in the online meetings, and I do it many, many times. It needs to be repeated in many different ways before you can slip past people's automatic objection. What I believe is meant by this is that you can't lose. People think in terms of winning, losing, right, wrong, succeed, or fail. But the pathwork message is you can't fail. You can find out where you're lacking so that you can do something about it. You can find out what you're not ready to do by reaching too far and falling over. You can find out what your negativity is by running into blockages and not be able to move any further in that particular arena of life until you have done deeper, more honest work. It is not a mistake to run into these walls. It's not a mistake that there is a wall. That these are challenges and tasks that will grow and strengthen us on a spiritual level. It is a different attitude to have than most people have on a social, community, friendship level. So out in the world, there's bad and wrong and right, and there's a lot of duality. So when you play this game, it's hard to get anybody to play with you. It's a private game. But if you can find in yourself, in your own journey, where something that you thought was bad and wrong and painful and should have been avoided, where you realize that this was life-changing for you in a way that you may not appreciate for 20, 30, 40 years. It changes your attitude towards life. Now, I did not assign it during this month, but I have often given as an example, sidebar, just to show that this is not crazy Jan and strange pathwork, that there's a Star Trek New Generation episode from season 6 called Tapestry. It's one of their best, it's acclaimed as one of their best ever episodes. And I want to say spoiler alert, but hopefully we're not listening at that superficial level. I'm going to describe a little bit about that episode. In the past, it was mentioned over the series that the captain, Jean-Luc Picard, had an artificial heart, mentioned in passing throughout the episodes. In this particular episode, his heart is so badly injured that he dies. And when he dies, the camera follows him into the spirit world where he meets one of his nemesis alien characters, a jokester, who says, "Here, let me help you out. We'll change your past." And so he takes the captain back to his days as a cadet, and they lead up to the moment where he was injured so badly that they had to give him an artificial heart. And the captain beams at this when this happens, because he has replay it, and of course he doesn't do it the same way. So he doesn't get hurt in this reenactment. And the next thing he knows, he wakes up and he's not the captain anymore. He's a science officer working under the people that used to work for him. And when he says, "Where is my future? Where is my promotion?" they tell him that he is a somewhat timid man, not cut out for command. And at this point, the captain says, "Put me back the way I was. I would rather be a captain and die the way I died than to live the life that I am now seeing." This is what I believe the guide is describing. When put in story form, we get it. It is difficult for us to see our own lives in that way. It is, however, a very powerful personal process. I invented another game to play in this month called If Life Was a Card Game that I stole. I credit them, but I stole it from a little book that I read. It does the same thing. It's a way of taking a different attitude than you have taken towards your life. So all of that is about seeing parallels in the growth process of the individual and humanity. And the rest of the lecture talks about transition from self-centeredness to selfhood, and talks about how the ego lacks a consciousness of its ego, that it is completely self-centered and therefore completely dependent, and that these two factors, self-centeredness and dependency, can't be unstuck. You can't be self-centered and independent, because in your self-centeredness, you will not be able to take care of yourself. And in your dependency, you will only be looking at your needs, not the wider needs of others. So it is a way of looking at how these two factors are interconnected, like two ends of a dumbbell. They cannot be separated. So if you have one, you have the other. In the third week, the guide looked at the fact that, start over. In the third week, we looked at the guide's phrase that mankind has left infancy and childhood and now is in adolescence, which is a very difficult time period. If you think back on your adolescence and the adolescent period of other human beings, and you imagine adolescents really running the world without the wisdom and knowledge and experience that one gains later, perhaps you can see immediately if the entire species of man is only in a spiritual adolescence period, why we go off the rails, why we try things that don't work, why we fall apart, we come together. It's a way of understanding that we're in a very rapid growth level of development, and we act things out without thinking about it. And we may believe things that haven't been tested yet. So taking that attitude about mankind and about ourselves can enable us to soften our judgment and our criticism. So in other words, I'm this age and I should be mature by now. That's a concept. Some people in their older years are mature and some people are not. Number one, every person is unique. But secondly, if we see that the way people develop is that they reach physical adulthood at give or take 18, and they reach social adulthood at give or take 30, that they may not reach spiritual adulthood until their 50s, 60s, or 70s, then most of us are exactly on track. And that's the invitation here, is to see that we're on track if we use a different scale than we are used to using. The last section is about the ongoing process of individualization. And the way I describe this teaching is that I'm sighing because it's kind of sad. We work best as a society if we compromise. And therefore, I believe that society has an agenda to keep people slightly immature. I take this concept from the zoological work that I've read about, and that is that domesticated animals, the animals who can be domesticated, are unique and special because their development can be slowed down so that they remain children or adolescents in their species attitudes. In other words, they are willing to be dependent on us. They are willing to listen to our instructions instead of saying, no, thank you, I'm going to live my own life. Society has a vested interest in keeping us together. We have more power when we are unified than if we are fragmented individuals. So we may have gone through a period of time, meaning thousands of years, where our survival depended upon banding together, and therefore we didn't want for individuals to go their own way. Although they could, we wanted the majority of society to go in a certain direction. We may be headed for a period of time where we are completing the process of individualization, and it will be more difficult to hold societies together, to make common decisions, to agree when we hit that point. So that if I can, I'm feeling a little nervous about phrasing it this way, but if there are groups who are less developed and more willing to be cohesive, they may be able to grab power for periods of time. Spiritual study is not about who's in charge today. It's about learning a deeper reality, a deeper obligation, a deeper meaning and understanding to the world. The guide promises us that this will manifest. But if we want the results today, it won't happen, because we are not alone on the planet. We are with others, and not everybody is ready for this process. So Pathwork emphasizes the work of the individual, so that you do what you can and extend how you can with others, rather than trying to tell others how to live their lives or what to do, which causes a rebellious opposition. So that's a little summary of Pathwork Lecture 120, The Individual and Humanity. Thanks for listening. I hope you read the full lecture. It's much better than my explanation.